I want to welcome you to Noise in the Attic, and you're embarking on a solo tour. And let me
Yeah,
ask, do you see this as an opportunity to go like deep into the set list for the diehard fans, or what can we expect?
all of it. I'm doing this for myself, shits and giggles. I'm a very blessed guy, fortunate, use whatever terms you like. Kiss was sold, the makeup and the tunes, about a year and a half ago, and I'm happy we did it. That was the right time, after 50 years of touring and, stadiums and all that stuff. And there's a great company called Pop House, and who bought it, and in conjunction with them, we've been working on something called KISS Avatars, which will see the light of day, in under 2 years, I would imagine, which is the cutting edge technology of, well, it's difficult to describe it in the same way that it would be difficult to describe virtual reality glasses when you first put it on. You're aware of the surrounding, and then you put these glasses on, and you're in another dimension. The floor disappears and everything. Have you ever had one of those glasses on your head?
I never did. It seemed very intimidating. I
Yeah,
would
see
think
that?
I'd start throwing up probably.
Yeah, that's why when I'm describing it, the words are very limited.
Yeah.
Uh, you have to just like, oh, your sense of balance is gone. The floor disappears. Reality disappears. You're in a different world.
My
People,
friend, my friend works at the Sphere. He runs the shows, and I haven't been
that's
in there yet, but it's probably similar almost.
not in the least. And the reason it's not similar is because you're seeing all this imagery and it's impressive, but when you put your hand in front of your face, it's there. If you look to the left, you see people there. So there's no sense of being in another dimension, if you will. No, this is virtual reality means as you're looking into the screen, you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't be in your room at all. You could be in space or filled with dinosaurs, and in fact, your world could start to move downward, and your sense of equilibrium goes. It's really crazy. At any rate, this Kiss Avatars thing is going to be like that, embodying the makeup and the fantasy world of that. That's coming up. And in the meantime, I have a lot to keep me busy. I have Simmons Hamilton films. We have an action thriller called Deep Water with Sir Ben Kingsley, Aaron Eckhart coming, Deep Water. Then another one right after that, and even a third one we're working on. And we have a restaurant chain called Rock and Brews. We have two at LAX and across America. In other words, my plate, I've got sodas and
Okay.
vodka and
I'm sh-
wines.
You've
There's a
you've
lot.
always stayed busy.
Yeah. But
Um,
it's not the same thing.
yeah,
You get
okay.
up, you get up on stage, and it's freeing. This kind of you have more fun on stage than the Pope does. And good luck to whoever gets picked as the new Pope.
Starts
But
today, right?
yeah, I'm not privy to the ongoings, but it's an interesting social phenomenon, shall we say? At
Agreed.
any
Agreed.
rate, so it's a chance for me to do nuggets that Kiss has never played live. In fact, a few of the tunes have never been played live or recorded. Some tunes that I've written that Kiss never recorded or other bands never recorded. And I discovered and produced a new band in 1978 called Van Halen. Took them in the studio. 15 songs later, that became the backbone of the first and second record. And one of the tunes, called House of Pain, is not the same song called House of Pain that they eventually would record. This is a steamroller song, the most energetic, high energy song they've ever recorded, but they've never played it live and they've never recorded it. So we do it live.
That's great. I can't wait to hear it. I know your time is limited. I would love to ask you a personal story that I think the fans would love to hear, if you don't mind. Could I ask you the story about the sweater and the can of peaches?
Well, I wasn't born in America. I was born in a small, very small place in Israel that didn't have uh, infrastructure or anything. It was just dirt roads. And my father, unfortunately, left us when I was about 6 or 7. And, there wasn't much there. I literally had a stick and a rock, and you went outside and played. And outside was the toilet, which was a hole in the ground, really a different world. And out of the blue, this box came in from CARE, CARE, part of the United Nations packages that went out anonymously. And inside this box, which my mother pried open, because we didn't have, I don't know, stuff. You had a knife and fork and spoon, and that's about it. And inside was this torn sweater, oversized, a can of peaches, a big one, big can. And I had never seen canned goods. I mean, I know this sounds like, what are you talking about? It's in every supermarket. I never heard of a supermarket. We didn't have television. I never imagined there was such a thing. You're talking about 1955 in Israel. There was nothing. It was a brand new country, with all the strife, the wars, and all that, which continue even to this day, sadly. And there was even a book, kind of a storybook about Bugs Bunny, who I never heard of or anything. And my mother at night used to read, flip the pages open. I'd look at the imagery, and my mother would have to make up the words because she couldn't read or speak English. But I didn't care. It was like, oh, and the bunny rabbit's going, here comes the hunter. And so I put on this sweater, which had holes in it, but I was proud. It was, there was no such thing as going shopping for clothing. You wore your rags. And there was a can of peaches, and my mother went outside and grabbed a big rock. We didn't have a can opener. We didn't have canned goods. You went to the local government office or whatever, and they gave you sheets of newspaper and slab of butter on one sheet, piece of meat on the other, some milk, and so on. And that would be your rations for the week. There are no supermarkets or stores. I know this all sounds like, what are you talking? You're exaggerating. Nope. It's just like that. And my mother smashed open the can of peaches and peeled back the metal part of it and gave the can to me. And with I was looking at the colorful art of peaches on outside. And I know it sounds crazy. I'd never seen or heard of a peach. We had apples and figs and, other kind of Middle Eastern things. And I remember with my two little hands, sipped the nectar of the thing. And I can still taste it. It was the sweetest thing I ever had. And I was just confounded. And my mother gave me half, one of the half peaches, and my mother ate the other half. And I never forgot it. And this kind of anonymous giving, which brightened up our lives, I've tried to do the same thing by anonymously giving clothing, food, money all over the world to people who would otherwise have nothing.
I thought that was a good story for this zeitgeist of we live in, and thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And speaking of sweaters, maybe you could put on your therapist sweater and explain Vinnie Vincent to me.
Vinnie Vincent, otherwise known as Vinnie Cusano, is a really talented guy. He can write songs, he can sing, he can arrange. His knowledge of guitars is great. Um, I'm just stating fact here, not opinion. And Vincent has sued us 14 different times and lost 14 different times. He had at least one, possibly two lawyers, his lawyers, disbarred. He fired the lawyer and then rehired the lawyer. And I'm afraid, in my opinion, Vinny's biggest problem has always been, it's my opinion, is Vinny. He's his own worst enemy, makes horrible life decisions, and to this day has never signed a contract with KISS. So we couldn't insure him, we couldn't insure the tour, because he kept renegotiating. I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. And many decades later, he has yet to sign his deal.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for the insight.
Well, I feel sorry for him because he can't enjoy, the fruits of labor. This
It looks like there's a new album coming out.
That means nothing today. You may as well just take a frisbee and throw it out there. That means nothing.
There's that too. Exactly. A mutual friend of ours saw Sebastian Bach over the weekend, and Sebastian was telling him a story about Sebastian was on Broadway doing Jekyll and Hyde, and he was the metamorphosis, the herky-jerky stuff. He told my friend, I took that from Gene's blood spitting routine, and motion for motion. And I was wondering, where did that originally originate for you?
Well, I was a fan of horror and monster movies, specifically Lon Chaney Sr.'s, not only Hunchback of Notre Dame, but also the original silent version of Phantom of the Opera. And because of the nature of, silent films, it was a herky-jerky kind of movement.
Gotta exaggerate everything. Kind of.
Yeah, everything, all this kind of big thing. And then I saw some more of that with Bela Lugosi, who I was a major fan of. So, a lot of that comes from our childhood, what we're influenced by and stuff like that. And the demon, which the fans called me, I never gave myself that name, nor did Paul call himself, the Star Child and the Spaceman. The fans did all that. And so, if I look back on it now, 55 years later, how did you get on this journey? And I couldn't tell you, because we didn't have a mentor. We didn't have a 10 steps for success and all that. We were four knuckleheads off the streets of New York who sort of rolled through life on our bellies with no resume, no experience, no qualification, and simply did what we wanted to do. And we had this delusional notion, let's put together the band we never saw on stage, because it was always somewhat infuriating that you'd go to see the Love and Spoonful or Sly and the Family Stone or, these great bands who had great songs, but that's about it. There was no stage show. There was, they'd strum their guitars or keyboards and stand in front of the mic, and that was it. And it wasn't until I started seeing Pete Townsend smashing guitars on stage or Hendrix lighting his guitar on fire that I started to think, well, and then there was the crazy world of Arthur Brown, who's another guy, where you started to see, well, wait a minute, the stage can also be performance, performance art, not just music, audio, visual. And that was where the idea of KISS came from, with the proviso that we were trying to be the Beatles on steroids, which is to say that every guy in the band could write songs, sing,
I mean, that's what it
Singular.
was. That's what it was for me, 6 years old me. That was me, you know.
Yeah, I get
That's,
it. Well, that was the intention anyway, and so far so good.
I mean, I think Bill Aucoin probably had a nice hand in that. And
I would say not.
no,
Bill Aucoin was a visionary manager because he was the one that trademarked. We never heard of trademarking. We're going to take your faces and we're going to send the imagery to the Library of Congress to make sure nobody else can rip you off. We went, oh, that's a good idea. And he also came up with the ideas. I don't want any pictures of you guys without the makeup. That was him. But in terms of intrinsically what the DNA of the band is, no,
sure.
no input. No, but nobody had that input. We just did what we did.
But I do recall always hearing colorful stories about Bill, about Ming vases and stuff like that. And I was wondering, maybe you could share a Bill story with us.
He was a man of, very fashionable and knew about museums and art and that kind of stuff. Nothing that we knew anything about. So he moved around in higher circles, if you will, and opened, those kinds of doors and had a point of view about how the stars of yesteryear, Marilyn Monroe and so on, were never photographed looking disheveled. Marilyn Monroe was always Marilyn Monroe. The stars were always aware, uh-oh, there's a camera here, and I've got to look like a star. And he tried to get that message to us, which is, when there's a camera there, that's going to be going out to the world. And it was a new way of thinking because we never thought about that. You just ignored everything. That I would say that was his major contribution.
So did he bring Sean Delaney in? Because Sean
Yeah.
seemed to come from a theater world, right?
Yes, and Sean was also a musician, had his own band, the Scat Brothers, and Sean was secretly Bill Aucoin's lover. They were a couple. And we didn't know or care about what's gay and what's straight. We didn't care. Oh, fine, that's your guy. Great.
It's funny, back in the 70s, we didn't care about labels where the kids
No,
today all want to label everything, and it's
that's going to pass.
counterintuitive to me.
Yeah, that's going to pass.
I hope so.
They, them, trans, all that stuff. It's just be who you want to be. I'm a cat person. I'm a furry. These are all labels, and we should respect anybody's personal choice, but also not allow anybody to push their agenda on you who may have a different point of view. So laissez-faire, live and let live. And then everybody wins. The only time you make enemies is when somebody tries to force Sharia law on you. You go, no, thank you. But if you want to do that, good luck.
Exactly.
So that's the great thing about democracy. Live and let live. You lead your life your way, but don't push your rights stop at my doorway. And I forgot what the question was, but I
I
stand
think
by.
we're talking about
stand
Sean
by
Delaney, who I
Yes,
wanted to
Sean.
segue into. Sean Delaney produced your solo album, the first one,
Yeah,
I
yes, he
believe.
did. And he also co-wrote some songs
Hmm.
with Paul, Take Me, or Mr. Speed, a few of those
All
things.
American Man.
Yeah, probably.
You know,
And he was an interesting guy he was our first road manager. So he literally drove the station wagon that carried us, oh my God, 8 to 10 hours of driving every day from one show to another.
so you really got to know each other at that point, I'm assuming.
Yes. And he was the one that would burst into the rooms and throw the chicks out so that we could shower up and get ready and, go to the next show. Yeah. And he wasn't interested because he pitched for the other team.
Girls, what do I care?
Yeah, that's right. He didn't care
Yeah.
about. Having said that, Sean, there was a sadness about him because even though he helped Paul with some songs and he worked with me on my solo record, he wasn't able to figure out who he was creatively.
Really, he
Because,
wasn't getting that
well,
satisfaction.
the Scat Brothers was a failed band,
But he was writing on Kiss records, and I mean, that's a feather in
but
the
but
cap.
but that's you're shining somebody else's apple.
Okay. Oh, that's kind of sad. He did do a solo album, didn't he, at some point? And it was like it mirrored the back cover of your solo albums.
Yes, he
Thank
did.
you, the same kind of thing.
But it has to break your heart when you pour your creative energies into something and it bombs and nobody wants to see you live.
Okay. Yeah.
No, that's not
I
a
could get
no, that's
over
not
that,
a
but fair
no,
enough.
no, that's not a small okay. That's all of it.
Okay. And then Vini Poncia produced Peter's solo album and then went on to Dynasty.
Yeah.
And it's well known that Peter didn't play on Dynasty outside of Dirty Living. But my ears, tell me if I'm wrong, my ears really think he could be on the Gene songs.
No.
No, because it sounds like a completely different kit to me than the Ace and Paul songs.
I think the word no is
Okay.
applicable here.
Well, you're settling the score then.
And the guy that played drums on Unmasked and Dynasty was Anton
Yeah,
Fig.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, you can say exactly, but the people listening have no idea what you're talking about.
Fair enough. Um, how
Even if it's unfair, the words are still accurate.
how
Most
did
people have no idea who Vinnie Poncia or anybody is.
okay. But this is for us and this is for the Kiss fans and they know. So
That's right. That's right.
yeah. So how did the Dynasty sessions evolve or devolve?
It
I mean,
was
was
a
it clear
it
from
was a
the day one or
when we met Vinny, it was a way to the solo records were keeping us apart because Ace wanted to leave the band and so did Peter, and Bill Aucoin, our manager, said, well, why don't you do a solo record? In fact, why don't we all do a solo record? So it has never been done before, during, or even since, where a band with all its members have done solo records. Not only that, but all released on the same day at the same time. We all love Charlie Watts' playing, but there's no solo album or anything. And
yeah.
sad to say, nobody cared. Something about the Kiss, and I was a Charlie fan, don't misunderstand me, but the Kiss thing was very strange, sort of all for one for all thing. People didn't want us to separate. I was the same way with the Beatles. I didn't want them to go do solo stuff. And the solo stuff really never lived up to the grandeur of the Beatles. There was some nice tunes. Imagine there's no, that's nice. That ain't Strawberry Fields Forever. No, 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 no. That's not even close. So we thought, hey, maybe we can get Peter's producer to produce the Kiss record and, kind of keep Peter more
Placate him.
involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, more involved. Eddie Kramer worked with Ace, so we'd already worked with Eddie, so we thought, Ace is okay with that. But in hindsight, Vinny was more a child of Phil Spector and pop songs, and the musical landscape was changing. Disco was coming in, a lot of pop music. And so that was when Paul sat down and wrote with a guy named Desmond Child, who had yet to become popular, a song called I Was Made for Loving You. And then, by the way, suggested Desmond Child work with Bon Jovi. When John called him, who do you think I should co-write with? And never said, no, you should go with this guy. And of course, that was the beginning of Desmond Child's career. It was a very pop heavy. It was not a good time for rock bands.
No, I think everyone was searching. It was the 80s,
Everybody,
every
yeah,
MTV, and everyone wanted new, new, new.
I wouldn't say new. I would say disco and pop dominated. So the Stones had do 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 do, Miss You,
Bad Company
and
was falling apart and Zeppelin ended.
no, it's not where I'm going.
Okay.
You cannot lead the witness, Your Honor. My point was disco was having an effect on the Stones, on Rod
That's true
Stewart.
too. Fair enough.
No, that's mainly the point. Not that Bad Company was falling apart. That's a different subject. That subject would be, is Bad Company falling apart? No, not my point. My point is disco is having an effect on everybody. Us, the Stones. Do you think I'm saying, that it's disco. So we all tried our hand in it, and all of us, Stewart and Stones, and we had great success with that. But I think it's a thumbs up to the uniqueness of each of these musical bands, including us, that we didn't go back and do more of that stuff, even though we had top 10 singles and number one singles doing disco. Somebody smart would have said, hey, that looks like the new direction. Let's do that. But intrinsically, that wasn't what KISS was all about.
Kiss was
Curious.
really, they were really burning the candle on both ends. You guys were so busy in the 70s, 2 albums a year, 2 albums a year.
Yeah.
When I'm going to say Peter first burned out, in retrospect, what do you think if you would have taken a year off and just decompressed and let everyone enjoy the fruits of the labor? And do you think Peter could have held together?
No. No.
Okay. Come back for Live Aid or something, you know?
Well, those are words. But when something is physically and mentally affecting you, well, why don't you go on vacation and then come back? That's not how life works.
But usually vacation, you go get healthy and sort things out and
Oh, I like the way you think. I wish the world was like that. Yeah, that's all. Somebody who's an addict, why don't you have a vacation? Then you'll come back.
well, vacation is a polite way of saying go get your act together. And
And how do you do that?
there's places you can go or people
Without
to talk to, or
how don't you have to be willing to do that?
I would think, I guess so, yes.
No, I know the problems with Ace and Peter, and we love them. We still love them. Well, we're not only chemical and alcohol. They were not satisfied with the riches and the fame and the stuff. They wanted, especially Ace, wanted to have a much bigger spotlight and wanted to do it on his own. And by the way, we said it very clearly. You want a solo career? Go and have a solo career. We don't want anything from you. Call it Ace Frehley. Go and do it. And good luck to you, but stay in the band. And again, bad decisions. Ace turned to me and said, no, I don't want to be in the band. And this is a quote. He said it to me more than once. If I go out on another tour with the band, I'm going to kill myself. No, these are deeper problems than, well, why don't you go on vacation?
We talked about Vini Poncia, and through the history of KISS, there are a lot of producers that kept reoccurring, the Bob Ezrins and the Eddie Kramers. Do you find one in particular really caught the essence of KISS more than another?
Yeah. Yeah, Bob Ezrin, heads, hands, and feet above everybody else.
Yeah.
That's a real producer, musician, arranger who didn't change KISS, but kicked us up a notch in, musical sophistication. In point of fact, we tour, this is before tuning devices. We just tuned by ear. And the way we tuned was very primitive. He literally sat down and said, no, that's not how you tune a guitar. And he showed us the harmonically tuning one string to the other, and then harmonically tuning to each other, which we'd never done before. We didn't know anything.
I always liked Eddie Kramer. I always thought he seemed very nurturing. I think he kept people happy and he knew how to work the room.
I don't know what that means.
I think you do.
No, I don't, because
Okay.
you can be in a room and make everybody happy, but you still have to arrange a song and do stuff. So whether you make somebody happy or torture them, there's the business of producing, which is arranging and doing that. Having said that, Eddie worked with the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, everybody, as an engineer. And in my estimation, Eddie was much more effective as an engineer, less as a producer. He didn't have as much input in arranging or changing keys, or maybe it should be a minor chord versus a major chord. That's what I meant. And he made everybody happy.
I was always surprised that he never came back into the fold in the 80s and the 90s at some point.
And that's maybe because he wasn't really a producer.
Okay. But I mean, some of your Kiss albums were self-produced, so maybe you always didn't need the full hand-holding.
In retrospect, it would have been better to have, well, Ezrin is on a higher level.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the Beatles are about as good as you can get, but George Martin actually came up with ideas like, let's only use strings on Yesterday. The Beatles wouldn't have done that by themselves. That's a real producer.
Looking back at all these old Kiss posters, touring with Rush, and you guys must have got along well with Rush. Was there anyone you didn't get along with?
In all fairness, we didn't tour with Rush.
Or they toured with you?
That's correct. Words matter. Did we get along with them? Oh, yeah. They were great guys. They've always been terrific.
But was there anyone you didn't get along with back then?
As a matter of fact, I'm reminded of Sammy Hagar, who we loved because of that Montrose record, and we invited him to open up for us right around I Can't Drive 55 and all that. So we were playing a few shows at Madison Square Garden, and the first show, it didn't go well for Sammy. So he's in the middle of the show, he stopped and started saying, fuck you, and, went off on the audience. You don't know what real rock is and stuff like that. So, we met backstage after the show and kindly said, please don't do that. You have all the lights and all the sound, everything. Go out there and knock them dead, but don't insult the fans. Don't do that. He said, yeah, okay. Next night didn't go well. And he did the same thing. And he was, kindly asked to leave the tour.
Yeah. I mean, you always had wonderful opening acts from Angel, Piper, all that stuff was great.
Wow, people don't realize that the first tours we gave bands, because we were fans, first tours for AC/DC, Rush, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Scorpions, Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, just goes down in the list over and over again, either in Europe or in America. It was their first tours, and we loved taking them out.
And I know we're running out of time. From here, somewhere later in the year, you're going to Vegas, right?
Yeah, and people misunderstand what that is. The Virgin event in November is really the fans, the KISS Army. They're taking over the hotel.
Is it kind of like the KISS cruise, but minus the boat?
Yes, sir. Just like that. Much more informal. This ain't a concert. In fact,
no makeup?
No, certainly not. We promised we would never do that again. No touring. We'll get up and jam. In fact, I'm not even sure how many of us are going to be there. I know Paul and I are going to be there. I think Tommy's going to come, but Bruce Kulick might pop in. It's very informal. Just
Are Ace and Peter welcome?
Of course.
You're one of the last bands of my generation that have all living members. And it'd be great if somebody could really utilize that still.
I like the way you think, but it's dreamland, my friend. That's not how life works. You can lead a horse to water, but that's all you can do. I personally invited Ace and Peter to jump up on stage with us at Madison Square Garden. Hey, why don't you invite him on the show? I did. But they said no.
All right.
But sir, I want this and I want that. And well, you can't have that, but join us to celebrate the beginning.
And you get wives involved and it becomes a whole thing. And
how about that?
Yeah.
The Yoko syndrome is not just a caricature, it's real.
Indeed. I want to thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man.
You know, I want to compliment you on this. I haven't thought about this stuff in a long time, and I think it's refreshing to go back and kind of think back. Would you have done anything differently, or woulda, coulda, shoulda? The answer is no. I would have done
what's
it.
your proudest moment in all of it in 50 years?
Surviving, of course. The best revenge is to live well. So the naysayers and everybody on the side, and they're entitled to their opinion, but living well is the best revenge.
I think there's a lyric there.
It may have been used, but
All the city sleeps.
yes. But I have to say that while you're running a race, that goes for you and I and anybody else, don't look over your shoulder to see who's running beside you. Just, run the best race you can. That's all you can do. Somebody's always going to have something to say about it. Not everybody likes Jesus. So you're in pretty good company.
Thank you, my friend. Safe travels out there.
Thank you. I wish you well.
Be well.